So as all of you know, I grew up as the son of a highly accomplished, highly regarded scientist and philosopher, Dr. Frank R. Wallace, who developed the neotech philosophy. And that grew out of the Ayn Rand's objectivism and the long line of Aristotelian philosophers. In neotech, Dr. Wallace identifies our human consciousness as the greatest value, and that man's greatest responsibility is to cure aging and death, to preserve our consciousness. As a boy who greatly admired his father, who was a highly regarded scientist for DuPont and the philosopher of neotech, well, I felt like if he said he was going to do something, consider it done. So I grew up believing he would end death and we would never die. I mean, I really believed that. I felt that. I thought that. I grew up emotionally feeling that death was unnatural, that our consciousness was the most important value, and curing death was our most important goal. Now, as I grew up, I gradually learned that other people did not feel that way, and I had to figure out why I was the only one. And as I grew up, became a teenager and then a young man, I began to learn the reasons why. I began to learn about personal stagnation, which is blocking the desire to live forever. People get in their ruts, their routine ruts, and after 10, 20, 30 years, I have a good friend who's a pilot, and back in the day, I excitedly said to him, hey, what if we can live to 130, 140, 150? And to my surprise, he looked at me and shook his head, and after giving it a little bit of thought, he said, well, no, I really wouldn't want to live that long. That floored me. He's a good friend of mine, and he had what appears to be a real glamorous job, flying all over the world, but he wouldn't want longevity. He wouldn't want to live past maybe the 70, 80, 90 years that human beings live today. So that was the first block I realized why people out there did not feel the way I did about curing aging. And then the next block that I learned was the political suppression in society, blocking the progress needed to make the medical breakthroughs to live forever. You go back a quarter of a century ago, and back at the turn of the century, people were talking 7 years we're going to cure aging. 7 to 10 years. Well, that was a quarter of a century ago now. And today, we're still giving the same time frames. You go to the RAD conference, same time frame. 7 years, 10 years. I've been hearing that for 25 years. And it's because of the political suppression, the loop I've talked about, where the anti-civilization, the regulatory bureaucracies and legislation and litigation, the anti-civilization just pulls things back down that begin making progress. It's the loop of the anti-civilization. So, as a young man and learning about the world, I knew I had to fix both of those problems to achieve the ultimate goal. And by this time, the ultimate goal was now my ultimate goal as well. So in studying personal stagnation, well, this led me to discovering neothink, which is thinking more widely at work and in life to create values and leave behind stagnation. And you all know this from my works, my writings, how I work on that aspect of individual freedom from stagnation. And you all know that neothink is limitless thinking accomplished by building puzzle pieces. This is what I bring to my readers. And now we're going to bring this to the world. We advance beyond the normal ways of thinking. Like most people today, they're stuck in what I call perceptual thinking. It's a see-react manner. It's a limited way of thinking. They go to work, they're delegated these responsibilities, and they see their responsibilities and they react. They react and do their responsibilities. Well, like my pilot friend, after 10, 20 years of a glamorous life, that starts becoming a burden because you're stagnant, and the human mind is not meant for stagnation. It's meant for creation. It's meant for creation, not stagnation. So with stagnation, we feel the burden of life as we get older. Those who are stuck in that stagnant life, and we eventually need to die. We must die. We have to die. Such as my friend, he wouldn't want to live 130, 140, 150. I'm sure all of you would love to do that with good health and vibrancy. So let's talk a little bit more about this perceptual thinking people are stuck in. And let's look at what is their next level. Well, it's conceptual thinking. It's pulling together percepts into more powerful concepts. I'll give you a little example here what this is. And then finally, you have a few people who do rise to the higher level of pulling together percepts and concepts for neo-thinking, limitless neo-thinking. Now, those are the super achievers. You know, the Henry Fords, the Thomas Edisons, the Steve Jobs, the Elon Musks. They all use neo-think. So neo-think has been around forever, but very few people tap into it. That's why I named it neo-think, new think, because most people, 99+% of the people, it's new think, it's neo-think. So I'll give you just a quick example of the 3 levels of thinking. Recently, I was at this shopping center close by. It has a grocery store, a major grocery store on one end, and a major drugstore on the other end. In between, there's little boutiques, shops, restaurants, and there's a bake shop. There's a bake shop in there that I've been here in this location for over 20 years and never walked into the bake shop. Well, with our holiday season coming up, and we have quite a few guests we're inviting to the house, so I thought, well, I'm here. So let me just take a quick walk into this bake shop I've never walked into. And I walked in, and I was blown away. It was beautiful, artistic, smelled delicious. The people were well-groomed and very helpful. I really fell in love with the little bake shop inside. But here I've been here over 20 years. Never once have I stepped foot in that bake shop. Now, the bake shop customer acquisition is done via perceptual thinking. So the owner is very limited. He has a plain brownish stucco front with a little sign up top that says bake shop. So that's perceptual thinking. I'm going to put up a sign and people are going to come in. That's customer acquisition at a perceptual level. Now, I mean, he must be doing all right because he's there 20 years later, but he never entered the limitless world that he could have entered. So let's go to the next level of thinking, conceptual thinking. So let's pull together a concept here and see what it would do to his customer acquisition. I'm going to suggest, let's just put a monitor in the big glass window, right? Just put a monitor. And by the way, you can't even see through that window because it's tinted. It's like you can't see the beautiful cakes and croissants and bread inside. You can't see any of that. So let's say you put a big monitor in the window, and it shows you those. It shows you what I saw on the inside, and it even shows you motion. It shows you big loaves of bread being baked and then poofing up and rising, and you can just start thinking, that fresh baked bread. Or showing the croissants poof up as they bake them, or the designer putting on the beautiful design, artistic designs on the cupcakes or the cakes, right? That's a concept. Now, with passersby, you're going to get a much higher customer acquisition by just that one concept, that one level of conceptual thinking. They'll see that, they'll become curious, they'll watch it for a minute, and guess what? Then they'll walk inside to see more. So we've jumped from perceptual to conceptual thinking at that point. Now let's take it further. Let's get into a neo-think puzzle picture. So what is neo-think? It's pulling together puzzle pieces. What are the puzzle pieces? The puzzle pieces are the concepts. It's pulling together concepts into a big picture. So I'm going to, just off the top of my head, and I do this, by the way, when I go to restaurants, I go to stores, my mind's always doing this. Like, wow, if they did this, they could double their customer acquisition. If they did that, they could become so much more efficient and save much more in costs. And my mind just always works that way. So let me put it to work here with the little bake shop. All right, so we've got now sight going on here with the monitor. Well, when I walked in, my stomach started gurgling because it just smelled so good. You know, I had to have some of that. So why don't we put some vents? Why doesn't the owner put some vents and put some fans and blow that aroma out onto the sidewalk in front of his bake shop? Well, people walking by would follow their noses, just like on that cartoon Popeye when Wimpy would smell the hamburgers and he'd follow his nose to the hamburgers. Well, they'd follow their noses right into that bake shop. So now we've got two concepts working. Let's throw in a third one, and then we'll pull together a little NeoThink puzzle picture. Let's say the third one is this. When I walked in, there were two employees. With no extra cost to the owner, take a simple folding table, put it out front, put a nice pink tablecloth on it, and at 5 o'clock onward, when the foot traffic is very heavy in that little shopping center, bring out some fresh baked bread. Slice up some of those delicious sweet cupcakes. Bring out some croissants. And make sure they're nice and warm too. And then the passersby, well, I can tell you this from the days when our family used to shop at Costco and they would have samples. I'm telling you, he would have a crowd around his little bake shop in no time. And when people see a crowd, they get curious. They want to know, okay, what's going over there? What's going on over there? What am I missing? And boom, his customer acquisition, well, I'm going to say it would multiple fold. How? Because he created a little NeoThink, pulled together a little NeoThink picture, a little puzzle picture there. And I'll also guarantee you this. If he had that aroma blowing in the noses of passersby, the beautiful scenes of the baked bread poofing up, and the delicious warm tasting table, I guarantee you that those people, myself included, over the past 20-some years that I've lived here, well, that picture would stay in my head. Every darn time I'd go into the grocery store, every darn time I'd go into the drugstore, I would see in my head that NeoThink puzzle picture, that customer acquisition NeoThink puzzle picture. And many times that would have drawn me to the bake shop. Not necessarily now because I'm on the keto diet for the past 2 years, but over the 20 years I would have been in there many times, I can guarantee you. If I had that little puzzle picture, I never went in once because of his perceptual customer acquisition. NeoThink doesn't stop there. If he had such a successful response to that NeoThink puzzle picture, well, he'd put another bake shop, replicate it. Remember that in my writings, replicating. He'd replicate that to the west side, then to the north and to the south, then to the state over. Eventually, like McDonald's did with Ray Kroc, it'd be all over the country, right? Limitless. And then when he's a wealthy, country-renowned, maybe world-renowned baker, well, then he gets influence and power. And he'll enter the realm of philanthropy, perhaps. Maybe the world of politics, because politics is the most integrated world, although the most evil world. But, you can get those good ones to go in there and do something really good. But that's what NeoThink does. It's limitless thinking. That's just one little example of the 3 levels of thinking: perceptual, conceptual, and then very few, but some people go into NeoThink. And it's limitless. Their power is limitless. So I used my NeoThink discovery to break through and then start writing NeoThink books for the self. You remember that? Say like the self-capture, the many-day power thinking team, to unleash the individual's full potential. And then I grew from there into the business for entrepreneurs, business owners. Remember that? How to turn your business into an engine of wealth and unleash its full potential by changing the structure of business from the perceptual delegating into these boring routine ruts and building this bureaucratic bloat in your company, to having these super efficient little wealth creators working for you through the division of essence, bringing the essence of the business into each and every job. Your company will work with far fewer people with far greater results. And you have the performance pay and the whole thing, the mini companies, remember that? So that was my next breakthrough NeoThink puzzle picture. Then it went to the world. Remember the company without a country with those tracking reports that got down to every single nitty-gritty detail within your company, and then your crucial detail reports, and then your essence reports. Now I just work on essence reports, but I very quickly can draw up and pull up, call up my nitty-gritty detail reports whenever I see a problem. And that happens from time to time. You're not immune to problems. And then next, keep reaching out and growing through my limitless neothink. Now, it's civilization. And I'm going to talk about that today, how civilization can reach its full potential, and we've never come close to our full potential. Never. With Immortalis, I'm going to actualize, I am actualizing, we are actualizing what my bestseller Super Puzzle idealized, which is mankind's potential. And that potential is a world where things eventually become free. That's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to lay out the puzzle pieces to show you this new economic theory that I've never seen identified in philosophy or economics. I'm an economics major, by the way, but very studied in philosophy. So I've never seen this theory, this theory, but you'll see how it's an unbroken line of logic as we go through this today. All right, so let me first make clear, though, when I talk about everything will be free, I'm not talking about, as you know, socialism or communism. But I need to make that clear because after a couple of weeks or a few weeks, we post this on my YouTube channel. And I don't want newbies coming to see this to think that I'm promoting any form of socialism or communism, because that's what they always tell you. You're going to get things for free and equal share and all that BS, right? No, this is a world of pure capitalism. But no one's seen it before. And the reason they haven't seen it is because on planet Earth, we have never experienced pure capitalism. So in the future, with pure capitalism, instead of money being business owners' payoff or rewards, the payoff and reward becomes contribution, pride, happiness, from tangible money to intangible emotion. But I'll have to go through the puzzle pieces for you to see the big picture, which is what I'm going to do now. Indeed, to get to see that neothink super puzzle, to see its puzzle picture revealing the world of mankind's full and seemingly selfless potential, I have to snap together the pieces here today. So I'll start here. The computer and information revolution of the late 20th century and early 21st century, and we've talked about this before. Computer power. Consider the cost for computer power. And today, for next to nothing, you can get a used iPhone with computing power that only the Fortune 500 companies could purchase on their mainframe not long ago. Actually, even more power, right? And the cost of computer power is dropping towards zero while the value is increasing toward infinity. And the same goes for information. You know, information used to be an incredibly expensive commodity. In fact, at one point, people used to say to me, Mark Hamilton, you are very fortunate. And I would say, well, why am I so fortunate? And they said, because you're in the business of information. And information, you know, people pay a lot of money for information. Well, that may have been true then, but now information is free. So it's backfired on me, if you want to call it that. Not really, because now my information is getting to more and more people. But if you want to just talk in straight business terms, now I got the short end of the stick, because information is free. You go to ChatGPT and it gives you all the information you ever needed for free. And of course, that brings me for full circle back to the whole college and all of that, which we won't get into today. But we've talked about that in the past, and the value these days in college, I just don't see it anymore, except for maybe a couple of degrees, and perhaps in the medical world or in the engineering world. But for the most part, anyway, I'll move on. The phenomenon, this phenomenon of the values rising toward infinity and the costs dropping towards zero, such as in AI today, right? This phenomenon happened because government could not get a regulatory grip on the advancement of the super rapid growth of personal computer power as it advanced at great speeds throughout the late 20th century and now in the 21st century. It's just been moving too fast for government to figure out how to really regulate it. So without the typical government regulatory burden, the technology soared and costs radically dropped. And this is not just a special phenomenon due to the breakthrough of the silicon chip. As you know, by the way, when I look over and smile, I'm looking at all of you. So that's why now and then I'll just take a little look over here. So, so my camera's in front of me, though. So as you know, to demonstrate how it's not just the phenomenon of the silicon chip, I write about, and you've read in my writings about James J. Hill, for example, the railroad tycoon who opened up the entire country to development along the northern border with his transcontinental railroad without any help from the government 150 years ago. Or Henry Ford and his perfection of the assembly line driving costs of fractions, making the car and transportation affordable to ordinary families over 100 years ago. And that whole assembly line just drove down costs, drove up values for decades. Thomas Edison bringing electric light to the world. Incredible advancements that drove down costs and drove up standards of living for humankind. That was all before the anti-business regulatory darkness that came to America with Franklin D. Roosevelt. So, without saying too much more about that, we can now begin to see it's the regulatory government holding back progress everywhere, in every country, in all industries. Energy, health, medicine, science, technology, they're all held back by politicization, by political agendas spawning progress-harming regulations and legislation. As we've seen in this regulatory suppression, it doesn't just stay at a certain level. It continues to rise with each new administration. So the past 4 years, we've seen this regulatory suppression rise up more than ever before over the past 4 decades in several critical industries. At Balaji's Network State Conference in Singapore, where my son Wallace and Josh both attended a couple of months ago, well, my son talked to me about the scientists he ran into who are doing some amazing things for human longevity. They're confidential. I can't talk about them here, but they're being held back, and they're expressing this to Wallace by regulations and legislation. And they're willing to go anywhere in the world to continue their research and development. But there's nowhere they can go. They express this frustration. They said wherever they would go, they would be knocked down and held back by the ruling class. Anywhere they would go, there's no place on planet Earth that they could go without, falling into these regulations that could even turn them into criminals. So that's what the geniuses of society are constantly up against. That's why today we're still saying the same talk that we were 25 years ago about curing aging and about longevity. There's nowhere in the world they can go to pursue their life-saving research. So imagine their excitement when Wallace talked to them about this idea of a land-based immortalis. Now, thousands of such geniuses of society would have that same elated reaction. Indeed, they, along with countless others, are just unable to move forward due to all countries' anti-progress laws and regulations. There's nowhere in the world to proceed with their incredible research and development. And their creation, which I'm privy to, would add decades to our lives. Mark my words, decades. So the ruling classes of all countries suppress progress with their legislation and regulations. We're all under a ruling class. Remember, I talked about the ruling class as a cult. We're all, since early life and through school, where this is what a cult does. It manipulates your minds to control your life for their benefit, for their power and wealth. These politicians enter worth 100,000 and leave worth 200 million. $200 million. Why is that? It's because they're a cult taking advantage of its victims, the people. It's always been like that. And because it's always been like that, the people accept it. It all seems normal. All civilizations lived in this same dimension. But there is this other dimension we've been talking about. Our planet has never seen this other dimension before. So let's start and really define the next puzzle piece, what it is that holds us back. What gives the ruling class such power to hold back progress? And everyone's basically accepting it, right? They may be a little disgruntled and talk, under their breath about it, but basically everyone's accepting it, right? So it's a common denominator among all countries, among all ruling classes. Is a common denominator. Let's find that common denominator. So what gives the ruling class, all ruling classes, their destructive power to hold us back? Well, if you were unmuted, I know a bunch of you would be saying initiatory force, right? Initiatory force. That's the common denominator. That's the scourge. That's what's behind the cult all over the world for all time. And as you all know, initiatory force is the opposite of self-defense force. It's the initiation of force. Say like with initiating political agendas by the use of force through regulations, through legislation, through litigation. So initiatory force has allowed the ruling class to become the scourge of mankind. Now without initiatory force, there could no longer be an agenda-backed, politicized legislation and regulation holding the geniuses back. It couldn't happen. In fact, the ruling class itself could not exist. Because when you really get down to it, the ruling class is there because of initiatory force. We'll learn a little bit more about that today. So, how can we remove it? Or here's a better question for people who aren't readers of mine. How could we possibly remove it? And is it needed? We think initiatory force in our ruling class is needed because we've always had it. And we're made to believe by our leaders that they must have that power to rule over us. How do they make us believe that? Well, through their illusions. We've talked about this in the past. Illusion pollution. Our minds are full of illusion pollution. They're illusions. And it's all we've ever known. So people who are watching this on YouTube for the first time, pay close attention to this next puzzle piece. And my readers, I know you're right there with me. So I'm going to ask you straight up, why should one adult have the power to initiate force on any other adult or their business? They should not, including politicians and regulatory bureaucrats, right? All of us neo-thinkers know that well. So this brings us now to two further puzzle pieces to the super puzzle. First, the tool to remove initiatory force. And it's, again, if we were unmuted, you'd all yell, the prime law. It is the fundamental natural law of protection and is the constitution of Immortalis. And you all know that the prime law is the fundamental law of protection, which is the only valid purpose of government, to protect its people. The prime law gets down to the very fundamental of what protection is, and it protects the smallest of all minorities, the minority of one, the individual. And when the individual is protected, all people are equally protected. Now, the next puzzle piece is you must understand how this new dimension of civilization would work. And this is where my readers now, we're going to open up some new thought here. Now I say new dimension because the prime law removes the ruling class. You see, the ruling class can only exist through initiatory force, which includes forced tax collection. And every civilization on earth and throughout history have lived under a ruling class, under leaders who could exercise initiatory force against the people and their businesses, more or less at their at their favor. The ruling classes all have this initiatory force built into their political structure. Immortalis does not and never can with the prime law constitution. Everything is based upon mutual value exchange. So government becomes a protection service. Now I'll explain in a moment how it collects revenues without forced back taxes, right? That seems impossible. We'll talk about that in a moment. Now Immortalis, your dollars do the voting, not elections. It's a whole new structure of government. In other words, you send, we'll start off at this. Well, you send a 10% tithe. That's a voluntary payment to the best values for protection. The only proper function of government, protection, right? So you'll send your 10% tithe to what you feel is the greatest value in offering the greatest value of protection. So the competitive nature of this service drives the best values to the top. Now, as I describe what living in Immortalis would be like, you'll understand why citizens would gladly, voluntarily pay a 10% tithe. In this civilization, for the first time on planet Earth, the geniuses of society are free of burdensome political regulations and legislation. They're free to bring their exhilarating values to the world without being held back. Now remember back to the beautiful puzzle piece in the relatively free from regulations computer and information revolution. Prices for computer power and information were driven down to fractions, towards zero, while the values, such as the computer power and information, raced toward infinity. With no ruling class in Immortalis, this phenomenon spreads over the entire industrial landscape, not just computer power. In this purely free civilization never seen before on Earth, the people would become universally wealthy, just as we became computer power wealthy. Costs would be driven so low that we all rise in our wealth power, our purchasing power, as prices are driven down and values are driven up. And that would happen to all industries, including the health industry, with no more ruling class political agendas, no more of those regulations and litigation holding back amazing research and development. Progress would accelerate and fatal diseases would become conquered and cured. Diseases like cancer, heart disease, and yes, aging too, would be cured in our lifetime, in our lifetimes. You know, we had a promising cure to cancer 50 years ago. It almost hurts for me to tell this little story. My father, he was very renowned scientist at DuPont with 5 patents. Not only did he develop the patents, but then he would go to the other side and move into the marketing of those products. So he was quite a whiz kid. That's not doing justice, but at DuPont, he was highly acclaimed. So he was on a team at DuPont that had developed basically what I consider a cure for cancer. The way this worked, they developed this extremely fine textile, so fine it was almost like a liquid. And it was impregnated with cancer-killing drugs. And those extremely fine textiles would be injected into the bloodstream. They would travel through the bloodstream and they would find and wrap itself around cancer tumors that now became harmless. They're trapped in their man-made coffins, I'll call it. But here's what happened. The government enforced these cost-prohibitive regulations that killed that project. Now remember, DuPont's the largest chemical company in the world. So if it could kill such a promising cure to cancer, one of the most widespread diseases of humankind, and DuPont was on the brink of curing that. But the cost-prohibitive regulations, government regulations, killed that at DuPont, which had billions of dollars behind it. Imagine all the people like who my son met in Singapore, those scientists, what it does to them. Everything is held back. And that's why 25 years later, we're no closer. We have not made the leap into the next level of human longevity. have not made. I was on a phone with a very prominent longevity expert, and he was expressing his frustrations to me. He's been in this all his life. He's about my age, and nothing's changed. We are still at the same level of longevity as we were 50 years ago. So these cost-prohibitive, politicized regulations could not exist in Immortalis. So Immortalis would quickly become the medical mecca of the world, rapidly curing these complex diseases. Why? Well, those scientists Wally talked to, or my son Wallace talked to, would come rushing to Immortalis. And so would a lot of these big, just honest, not big business, not revolving door with government, but just these honest geniuses of society. It'd be a brain drain across the world. They'd all come to Immortalis to cure, conquer, and cure. Moreover, we've talked about crime would go away. The biggest motivator for crime is gone, money. Everyone's going to be wealthy in that society, so that reduces most crime. And the prime law, the whole focus of it is not allowing initiatory force. So punishment would be very swift and unforgiving. The crime would just evaporate and become just a theory. Now, as all people in this new civilization, which is a new dimension on Earth, by the way, as they become wealthier and wealthier, healthier and healthier, safer and safer, well, first they will be more than happy to voluntarily pay 10% of their income to the system that made them wealthy, healthy, and safe, to the protection services we'll call government, that provide the conditions that bring the people so much wealth, health, safety, and frankly, happiness. So that's how the financing of the so-called government would occur. Because people would be they'd look around the world and say, no, thank you. I'll be right here, and I'll pay my 10% tithe. So they want to keep this place, Immortalis. They want to keep it the way it is because it brought them and their loved ones such a great life. So for the first time, government would exist without forced taxes, without initiatory force, without forced taxes, with a voluntary tithe. Now, let's explore what's happening with everyone becoming more and more wealthy and technology driving down costs of fractions towards zero. So let's look forward a little bit, and this is something new to all of us. Let's look forward into Immortalis. Right now, we've just been concentrating on launching Immortalis. Let's do a little neo-thinking out there into the future as to where we're headed. So at some point, the people, including and especially business owners, would become so wealthy in this society where your purchasing power just moves toward infinity, right? That with such explosive purchasing power, that greater and greater profits, well, that becomes less and less important because everything is so affordable and people are so wealthy. I mean, they can afford everything they need and more. So what do business owners, what do I do? What do we do to seek motivation now? What motivates us now? Because in capitalism, all we've ever been taught is that profits motivate business owners. Profits. But in Immortalis, looking into the future, with these puzzle pieces we've been bringing together here, well, profits no longer are so important to us. In fact, they become less and less relative. So people like me, business owners, Elon Musk, entrepreneurs, well, they would become more and more motivated. And I could tell you this straight from my heart, by their ability to create values that help others. Deeply motivated by their internal feelings of contributing important values to society and how that resonates emotionally within, the pride, the admiration, the happiness inside. Business owners would shift from being motivated by profits. Remember, they have more money than they could ever spend in that future society, in that new dimension. So they would shift their motivation from profits to being motivated to helping others. Indeed, as shocking as this may seem, despite everything that's been said about capitalism, well, that is the end result of pure capitalism. We've never had pure capitalism. And it's what I call the beautiful ecosystem of mankind, achieving happiness within by creating values for others. It's so beautiful. Let's just sit back. Hi, everyone. Let's just take a minute to think about that. The beautiful ecosystem of being human, fulfilling that child of the past, that happiness within, by bringing values to others. It's poetic. So now you can see how the outlook and role of money is shifting in this new civilization, Immortalis. It's shifting from tangible rewards, aka money, to emotional, spiritual rewards, pride and happiness. Imagine the driving force of the economy. Now just imagine this. Let's put ourselves out there 10 years into Immortalis. Imagine the driving force of the economy, the engine of the economy shifts from money, profits, wealth, to contribution, pride, happiness. From tangible wealth to spiritual wealth. Now, I know a lot of what-if questions are rising in everyone's heads right now. I know that because I've gone through this myself. But let me just continue here. Think of those business owners. In Immortalis, they have so much money. More money doesn't do anything for them. I mean, but in that future, just the delight inside of, let's say, curing cancer would bring to someone, or being part of that huge Neothink super puzzle to cure cancer. What that would do, like my father was a piece of that super puzzle that was destroyed, right? But what about you? What about us in the future and being part of these super puzzles? And we have everything we need. We have everything we want. We could take any trip we want. Money becomes, it's an inflection point. Money changes. It no longer is in the forefront. Helping others is. Moving humanity forward is. So at some point, business owners, and they'll be the ones to start this, they'll do this, what I call, they'll go free. They'll stop charging for their products. I know that because I know I would love to be in that time frame of Immortalis. I would love to be there. I would love to put my books out for free so many more millions could receive my values. Well, the pride, my goodness, and happiness that would fill me within. But in this civilization, we cannot yet release our values for free. Well, we can't in this anti-civilization because we're still dependent on money for survival. And the capitalism that we do have in this anti-civilization is still trapped in the anti-civilization. That's why I say we've never had pure capitalism. Pure capitalism, everything flips. It flips from what we've all been taught about capitalism with all the negativity associated with it. It flips. It flips to the most spiritual good that humans can ever experience. I know this is a lot I'm saying, it's a tall order, but stay with me here. So that's what we have to look forward to, because in future Immortalis, there's no more cult. There's no more cult-like ruling class. Instead, it's just pure geniuses of society. It's let the Steve Jobs go. Let the Henry Fords go. Let the Elon Musk go. You know, Elon Musk had to go through so much harassment to launch his rockets because he had to find out and prove that it won't land on a shark or a seal when they re-enter the orbit. That's just one little example he had to get around. Let him go. Let him go. And before you know it, he stops charging us for his values. That's what's coming in Immortalis. As more and more business leaders go free, they are going to, one after the other, it's going to be like dominoes, stop charging for their value creation. Then the commerce in Immortalis transitions from tangible profits, which is all we've ever known in this dimension, to spiritual rewards, which has never been known. That's in the next dimension. That's in the civilization of the universe, the next dimension. Immortalis is the first civilization of the universe dimension on Earth. So in other words, as more and more products become free, in time, the entire civilization will go free. Now, I know this is a little hard to grasp. And as I said, you have a number of what-ifs brewing. So next Tuesday and Thursday, I'm putting up 2 podcasts on my YouTube channel at Real Mark Hamilton to help explain this inflection point. Those 2 podcasts, they've already been recorded. And be sure to watch those. Next Tuesday and Thursday, they'll be loaded. They're about an hour each. And they're going to answer a lot of your questions. Now, I want to get to one of my members' questions. You all know Aluda. And she said in a daily comment to my Daily Prime, how she once would imagine a world without money and how wonderful it would be. But then she would wonder, who would work in the restaurants? And that would sort of end that beautiful vision, right? So that's a great question. Now, I'm going to get into that because this will answer a lot of the what-ifs that are brewing right now. Years ago, I wrote how computers, automation, and robotics would steadily take over jobs of labor, what we can call close-ended jobs. And in some of my writings, I call them dead-end jobs. Now, look, I appreciate every person and a productive job contributing to society. So I'm just using this in the larger neo-think sense, that it's a dead end. It's like the bake shop. They got that nice little thing going, but it's in perceptual thinking. It's a dead end. They're not spreading all over the country and the world like McDonald's, right? So call it jobs of labor, close-ended jobs. Yeah, dead-end jobs. And how, and I wrote how that phenomenon of computers, automation, robotics would push eventually the human race into jobs of the mind. That's really where we need to be. What we'll call open-ended jobs, because our essence is using our minds, it's value creation. So as computers, automation, robotics take over the jobs of labor, it pushes the human race up into jobs of the mind. Here's an example. When I was a young boy, my dad took me on a trip to Detroit. I loved this trip. And it was to a car manufacturing company. And I can't remember which car company. I was very young. But the assembly line stations, and I do remember, I see this vision this image in my head. They were stationed with men with these long, sort of rubberized aprons, and all the stations were occupied by men. Today, you go to any car manufacturing company, and those stations are occupied by robotic arms. In the future Immortalis, all close-ended jobs of labor will be replaced with automation and robotics. The people will be pushed up into the open-ended jobs of the mind. Now, so let us leave the past now and look at the jobs of the future in Immortalis, because this gets really interesting. In Immortalis, we will be building major projects for humanity. You got a little feel for that when you read Neil Think's Super Puzzle, the Miss Annabelle story. And as you move to the 3rd book of that trilogy, you saw how we were involved, mankind was involved in building these major super puzzles, major projects to move forward humanity. These projects, now they'll be huge Neil Think's super puzzles. I already see a number of them in my mind. And there'll be these huge Neil Think super puzzles for what? for the advancement of humanity. Remember, darkness does not exist in Immortalis. The prime law took it away. So people will desire to be part of these massively large projects to benefit humankind. And now I can concretize that. I can show you, we can get a sneak preview of this today, right now, with the response to DOGE, the DOGE hiring project, the Department of Government Efficiency, Elon and Vivek. Ask for people willing to work, get this, 80 hours a week for free with no compensation. I mean, normally you would think if you ask someone to work 80 hours a week for free, no pay, well, they would tell you to go to hell, right? But the response has been overwhelming. Thousands of people, even highly paid professionals, are sending in enthusiastic applications. They're struggling to get chosen by Elon and Vivek. People are excited. Why? Because they want to become a piece to this super puzzle. They want to contribute to moving humanity forward. And that gives us a little concretization, a little peek into human nature and our deep desire to work on something larger than life. Neil thinks super puzzles that help humanity forward. I mean, after all, isn't that why you're here with me today? Because you know what we have here. We have a larger than life Neil thinks super puzzle that's helping move humanity forward to the next level. And tomorrow in Immortalis, that's going to become our jobs of the future. People want to become a piece, a valuable, meaningful piece to Neil Think super puzzles. Today, we already have that with Doge. Those people are so beside themselves, overly enthusiastic, willing to devote themselves 110% to that super puzzle, Doge, the Department of Government Efficiency, because they know that's something that's going to push humanity upward. And this, in our anti-civilization, can you believe that? In our world that depends on money to survive, they're giving up their jobs. They're taking 2 years away from being a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant. No pay, working twice as hard as they've ever worked. Just giving it because they want to become a puzzle piece to that super puzzle. They want to know that's human nature, man. They want to know that they are contributing to the advancement of humankind. So what's going to happen in a world where money is no longer important? Where huge super puzzles call on our human spirit to put our valuable puzzle piece, the pride and happiness that comes with that, into a world benefiting super puzzle. I mean, I already see that with the ambassadors of Immortalis. Well, I think it's obvious what would happen. I think if we look forward 10 years into Immortalis, we get a pretty good idea of what's going to happen. Those will be the jobs of tomorrow. Those are the jobs in the civilization of the universe when we join our cousins out there. We would be drawn to contributing to those super puzzles with excitement and overwhelming enthusiasm. I can see it, I can feel it. Even much more so than the overwhelming response to Doge. Even more so, because we'll be in a civilization of the universe. We won't depend on money anymore, which we do today in this anti-civilization. We would feel great honor and pride to put our personal piece, to snap that in, the beautiful super puzzle, society's mighty division of essence in full scale. You know, earlier I talked about division of essence in businesses. Well, now civilization will enjoy the division of essence in tomorrow's Immortalis. So let that sink in. Civilization's division of essence. We would not need or be motivated by money in the beautiful society, the universally wealthy society. Our deep motivation would transcend money. Our motivation would come from within, not from without. Our motivation would come from the internal joy of being a valuable part of moving humanity forward, of placing our piece, our division of essence puzzle piece into the incredible super puzzle. I mean, remember in NeoThink Super Puzzle, the Miss Annabelle story, the contributions of the group and then the world, the group being Miss Annabelle's students as adults, and then the entire world join in the super puzzle to cure death. Remember that? That's where we're headed, my friends. So to kind of wrap this up, robotics and automation, they'll take over all jobs of labor. And building and placing in our puzzle pieces into humanity-lifting super puzzles become our jobs of the mind in a moneyless world in Immortalis. That's the beautiful future, my friends, of Immortalis. And it's an unbroken line of logic. That's how I wrote the super puzzle. I had to delete large sections because I felt they broke the line of logic. Everything you read in the Miss Annabelle story is an unbroken line of logic. Everything I told you here today is an unbroken line of logic. Now, as I said, a number of you will have what-if questions. That's totally natural. Last night I was sitting down with Wallace answering a bunch of what-ifs, right? Then we filmed one of the two podcasts, a second podcast after that. After we filmed the podcast, he said, "Oh, Dad, geez, I see it now. I see it all." All right, so I want you to, this upcoming Tuesday and Thursday, to watch those two podcasts that I've done specifically to answer all the what-if questions that are brewing right now. All right, so now, tomorrow, we're all building right now a super puzzle with Immortalis. And tomorrow, as we move into Immortalis, we'll all be driven by the magnificent value creation. And no one is going to get bored when you begin to see what's going to happen. No one's going to get bored. No one's suffering from stagnation. No one's carrying the burden of life on their shoulders, trying to do activities to, travel, take vacations, trying to, take the grandkids to Disneyland. They're trying to do things to suppress the burden of life. That of the record player and the old turntables, on the Ascension. I said, some of you, I said, stretch your minds, prepare for today. Go back to things that we don't even know about today, decades ago. Scott, you brought up turntables, right? 8 tracks, and remember 8 tracks and audio cassettes. But remember on the turntables between the songs, that's the stagnation between those exciting activities. That's a metaphor that we feel in life, between taking our grandkids to Disneyland or between traveling, to Europe or Notre Dame or whatever it might be. Between those excitement activities, and as we get older, that stagnation, that stagnant sound, that burden of life grows and grows and grows. And eventually, like my pilot friend, we're done. We're done. We're not meant to live in stagnation. Today, I show you the way out. Remember, my very first meeting with you on the movement, I said, we aren't going to any longer, we've done this, we've tried this, go up and confront and battle against the powers that be, the cult. Because we've done that in the past. We've gallantly done that. We paid a heavy price. But what I've realized through NeoThink is that we don't go up against it. We just leave it. We move in our own direction, and that's Immortalis. Maybe people will call it Galt's Gulch from Atlas Shrugged. But we are starting Immortalis, and in Immortalis, after what I laid out for you today, you can see that we will not get bored. We will not have stagnation. We will not have the burden of life, because we will love our lives. We will love life. that child of the past will be living in us again. We will be playing at life, and we will be suited for eternal life. And being suited for eternal life, well, that's where all the focus is going to go, just like I wrote about in the Miss Annabelle story. Even before we have immortality, we become the immortals of Immortalis. Why? Because we will be suited. We will be suited for eternal life. That was the epiphany I had when I built this Neothink puzzle picture in my mind while writing my 1,200-page bestseller, Neothink Super Puzzle. It became so clear and so obvious once I built the Neothink Super Puzzle in my mind. Well, I realized it was my life's mission to make my vision a reality. And that's where we are now headed, my soulmates. That's where we are now. And this is the reason why I've begun Immortalis with all of you and with the prime law as our constitution. And you have risen from my readers to now my puzzle pieces to this incredible super puzzle. You're putting your piece into this super puzzle. And as all of you know, my 1,200-page trilogy gives us a look into what Immortalis will be like and what we will accomplish together. At some point, I'd recommend taking another read through Super Puzzle. That's for some of you who got the earlier versions. That's the Neothink cover with the 3 treasure keys, the 3 golden treasure keys. And those of you who have gotten the later version, it's the title is The Super Puzzle. So to you, you and I, the most important goal of Immortalis is seen in its name, Immortalis, which is Latin for immortal. Remember, the greatest value in the universe is consciousness. I don't need to tell you this. Therefore, the greatest responsibility of mankind is to not let consciousness perish, and you all know this. When the geniuses of society are not held back any longer, in Immortalis, they'll rapidly cure fatal diseases and then cure death itself. We're all doing our part to make this happen in Immortalis, and we will all do our part. Those are our jobs of the future. So to conclude, Neothink Super Puzzle shows us a society in which people are wealthy, healthy, and crime-free. Remember, wealth, health, and peace, right? Wealthy, healthy, and crime-free. And filled spiritually with self-peace, pride, and happiness, playing at life so that they want to and are suited to live eternally. And now here we are, together, shoulder to shoulder. We're part of the world's most important mission to turn my puzzle picture into reality by way of Immortalis. Thank you for being here today. We certainly are on an exciting mission together to join our cousins in the sea of you. It begins right here on earth in Immortalis. I look forward to each and every one of your comments tonight. After these meetings, I always look forward. I can't wait to get home to watch those, to watch you speak your mind, and some wonderful, beautiful integrations. Even if I have to stay up all night tonight listening to you, I plan to do that. So I truly enjoy hearing your comments. I'm going to be leaving here. You're my beloved Neothink family. I love you all. And now, with much love, I'll turn this back over to you, Alicia. Bye, everyone. Love you all.